The small town of Ravenswood had always been quiet, but things changed when a series of gruesome murders started to happen every full moon. The townspeople were terrified, and the police were baffled. The bodies were torn apart, and it looked like an animal had attacked them. Despite their best efforts, the police couldn't catch the killer. It seemed like he was always one step ahead of them, and they didn't have any leads. The town became a ghost town every full moon, with people locking themselves in their houses and praying they wouldn't be the next victim. One night, a young couple, Lisa and David, decided to take a stroll through the town park. They didn't believe in the rumors and thought it would be romantic to see the full moon together. They walked hand in hand, admiring the beauty of the moon and the stars. Suddenly, they heard a howl. It was the most terrifying sound they had ever heard, and it sent shivers down their spines. They tried to run, but it was too late. The werewolf had caught up to them. Lisa was the first to go. The werewolf pounced on her, tearing her apart limb by limb. David tried to fight back, but he was no match for the werewolf's strength. The werewolf ripped David's throat out, leaving him to die on the ground. The police found their bodies the next day, and the town was in an uproar. The mayor promised to do everything in his power to catch the killer, but the townspeople had lost faith in him. They felt like they were living in a nightmare, and they didn't know how to wake up. The next full moon, the werewolf struck again. This time, it was a family of 4 that was killed. The father had tried to defend his family, but he was no match for the werewolf's claws. The mother and children didn't stand a chance. The police were desperate for a break in the case. They hired a team of werewolf hunters to come to Ravenswood and help them catch the killer. The hunters were some of the best in the world, and they were confident they could take down the werewolf. The night of the next full moon, the hunters set up traps throughout the town park. They knew the werewolf would be there, and they were ready for him. As the full moon rose, the hunters heard the familiar howl. They saw the werewolf coming towards them, and they opened fire. The werewolf was hit, but he didn't go down. He charged at the hunters, tearing them apart with his claws and teeth. The hunters had underestimated the werewolf's strength, and they paid the ultimate price. The next morning, the police found the hunters' bodies scattered throughout the park. The werewolf was nowhere to be found. The town was in despair. They had thought the hunters would be their saviors, but they were wrong. The mayor declared a state of emergency, and the National Guard was called in. The town was put on lockdown, and no one was allowed to leave their houses after dark. The people of Ravenswood had never felt so helpless. As the next full moon approached, the people of Ravenswood prayed for a miracle. They knew the werewolf would come back, and they didn't know how to stop him. The night of the full moon arrived, and the town was silent. Suddenly, they heard a howl. It was the werewolf. He was back, and he was stronger than ever. The people of Ravenswood huddled in their homes, praying they would be safe. The werewolf prowled through the empty streets of Ravenswood, his senses heightened by the full moon. He could smell the fear of the townspeople, and it only made him more powerful. He came across a house with a weak lock on the back door. With a swift kick, he broke it open and made his way inside. The family that lived there had barricaded themselves in the bedroom, but it was no use. The werewolf tore through the door like it was made of paper. The family screamed as the werewolf attacked. The father tried to fight back, but he was quickly overpowered. The mother huddled in a corner, trying to shield her children from the beast. But it was no use. The werewolf ripped the children apart, leaving nothing but a bloody mess behind. The next morning, the police found the house in shambles. The family was dead, and the werewolf was gone. The town was in chaos. The National Guard couldn't protect them, and the werewolf seemed invincible. The mayor knew he had to do something drastic. He called a town meeting and proposed a plan. They would bait the werewolf with a sacrificial lamb, a person who would willingly offer themselves up to lure the werewolf into a trap. The townspeople were horrified by the idea, but they knew they had no other choice. They drew lots, and the unlucky winner was a young woman named Emily. She knew what she had to do. She would sacrifice herself to save the town. The night of the next full moon, Emily walked into the town park, alone and defenseless. She knew the werewolf would come for her, and she waited, trembling with fear. Suddenly, she heard the howl. It was closer than ever before. She turned and saw the werewolf coming towards her, his eyes glowing in the moonlight. Emily stood her ground, offering herself up as the sacrificial lamb. But the werewolf didn't attack. Instead, he looked at her with an almost human expression. He hesitated, and for a moment, it seemed like he might spare her. But then, something changed. The werewolf's eyes turned red, and he bared his teeth. Emily knew she was in trouble. She tried to run, but the werewolf was too fast. He tackled her to the ground and began tearing into her flesh. The townspeople had been waiting and hiding, ready to spring their trap. They heard Emily's screams and knew it was time. They rushed out, armed with silver bullets and torches. The werewolf was caught off guard. He had been so focused on his prey that he hadn't noticed the townspeople. They fired their silver bullets, hitting the werewolf in the chest. He roared in pain and fell to the ground. The townspeople circled him, ready to deliver the final blow. But something strange happened. As the werewolf lay dying, he transformed back into a human. It was a man they all knew, a local farmer named Jacob. Jacob had always been a quiet man, keeping to himself. But as the full moon approached, he would change. He had no memory of what he did as the werewolf, but he knew he was responsible for the murders. The town was in shock. They had never suspected Jacob, and they didn't know what to do. The mayor called the authorities, and Jacob was taken into custody. The people of Ravenswood tried to move on from the tragedy, but they knew it would never be the same. They had lost so many loved ones, and they had been living in fear for months. The legend of the werewolf of Ravenswood lived on, a cautionary tale of what can happen when the darkness inside.